Welcome to Wayward Writers. I'm senior literary agent and author Heather Cashman.
I'm author and writing coach Stephanie Bearce.
And I'm author and writing coach Nicki Jacobsmeyer.
Our mission is to nurture and enrich established writers throughout their publishing journeys.
We welcome all genres, age groups, and publishing paths through video podcasts, online webinars, in-person retreats, and more.
We're here to help you conquer your path.
Thank you for joining us today. We are so excited to have Nicole Evelina with us, and we are going to be talking all about her amazing career and the awards that she's won and how we can win awards too. So, Nicki, can you tell us about Nicole?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for having me with you today.
Oh, thank you for being with us. So it is my pleasure to introduce Nicole. I've known her for several years through a writing group here in the St. Louis area called Saturday Writers. Nicole Evelina is a USA Today bestselling author and biographer living in South Bend, Indiana. She writes historical fiction, nonfiction, and women's fiction. Her books have won more than 50 awards, including 4 Book of the Year designations. Nicole is now a hybrid author, but was named Missouri's top independent author by Library Journal and Biblio Board as the winner of the Missouri Indie Author Project in 2018. She has been awarded the North Street Book Prize and the Sarton Women's Book Award. One of her novels, Madame Presidentes, was previously optioned for film. Nicole's fiction tells the stories of strong women from history and today with a focus on biographical historical fiction, while her nonfiction focuses on women's history. Both share the stories of unknown or little-known figures. She's also a ghostwriter employed by Kevin Anderson and Associates, as well as Gotham Ghostwriters. Nicole's writing has appeared in the Huffington Post, The Hill, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Independent Journal, Curve Magazine, and numerous historical publications. She is represented by Amy Collins of Talcott Notch Literary, and you can find her online at NicoleEvelina.com. Welcome, Nicole. Your bio is obvious as to why we're having here to talk about awards. Over 50 awards. Congratulations. I hope you celebrated everyone and then some. That's awesome.
Yes.
We want to hear about your journey, and I know some of you know Amy Collins. We had her back in August on episode 31 sharing how to tackle synopsis. Can you share your journey with us and our audience, please?
Sure. I'm going to give you the short version because it really goes back to 2008 when I started taking my writing seriously. I started out with an agent. I had her for about 2 years. And she didn't manage to sell any of my books and basically stopped doing her job for all of her clients. So I made the really hard decision to leave her. And that was the hardest decision I've ever made. And at the time, several of my friends were having a lot of luck with self-publishing. I gave myself a crash course, learned everything I could in about 6 months, and self-published my first 4 books in the beginning of 2016. So yeah, it's been an interesting road. I was very happy being a self-published author. I liked the control that I had over everything. It's a lot of hard work. And I decided I had a certain amount of success that I was very happy with, but there are things that I have as goals in my career that unfortunately, as of right now, you can only really do if you're traditionally published. So I was actually thinking about getting an agent when Amy contacted me. I had met her a couple of years before through Saturday Writers. She came and talked about marketing, and I do marketing in my day job. So she and I just completely hit it off. And I had no idea that she was a foreign rights agent. So she called me and said, "Hey, I'm becoming a full agent, not just foreign rights. Are you looking for representation?" And I said, "Yes, I am." That's how we got together. To me, that is the perfect example of networking, and you never know how people that you meet are going to affect your career or your future. Because if you would have told me that was going to happen, I wouldn't have been able to see a way for it to work. Yeah, I was her first client.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. That's so
really
great.
cool.
Yeah, we've been together for many years now.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
How
Yeah, I ended up getting some book contracts on my own just through people that I knew. That's the Fierce Females in Television and the Sex and the City book. And I had been working on that when she and I got together. And she has since sold my biography, America's Forgotten Suffragists, my historical fiction, Catherine's Mercy. So she, of course, is working on foreign rights, audio rights, all of that stuff, movie, TV, for all of my books, not just the ones that she has sold. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, I have a couple side questions from what you just said. Okay, you said in
Yeah.
2008 is when you decided to
Mhm.
get serious. And I'm always interested how, when people do decide that, what changes for you in your routine?
Um, I think before 2008, the writing was really just something I did when I got bored. It was a hobby. I didn't expect it to go anywhere, even though I finally figured out around that time that what I was writing would be novel length. I didn't know if I was going to do anything with it, and the story of why I started taking it seriously is funny because I read the Twilight books. And at that time, the story that was out around Stephenie Meyer was that, oh, she was just this average person and she got this big deal. And look what it turned into. It's changed a little bit since then, but I work in public relations. I also know why that happens. But it was the idea of, hey, if she can make it and get this huge success, so can I.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say that was a real inspiration for me. Are those the best books I've ever read? No, but I loved them. I was a twihard, and it did so much for me.
I love a twihard. That's awesome.
Oh my God.
I haven't heard that one.
Yeah, that's actually what we call ourselves.
That's awesome. And I also love how you said, we talk a lot about community, obviously, and trying to get to things. And I love that you had a network and a community with Saturday Writers, and you went and it was a free event. But because you went and you put your pants on and you showed up and you got uncomfortable, look what happened. And that's the stuff that's so inspiring, I feel like, and just makes you tingle. You get goosebumps. So that's awesome.
And I will say I loved being a part of Saturday Writers. And since I've moved, I haven't found the community yet. A lot of it is because I've had other things going on, like getting engaged and getting married.
So small.
But it's definitely something that I miss, not having a place to go and people to commiserate with. And community is so important in writing, partly because it is such an isolating thing to do, but also just because you have people who think the way you do. You have, people who understand what you're going through, or even if they haven't experienced it, they've heard somebody else who has, whether it's a high or a low. Mm-hmm. And then you have people who can look at your work, you can look at their work, and it's a growth opportunity. There's no downside to it for me.
Right. Well, we're excited you're part of our community.
Me too.
And part of being in that community is being able to celebrate with other people, because really only other writers kind of understand that. And you've won some really prestigious awards like the North Street Book Prize. Which award has meant the most to you? What did you celebrate the biggest, and why?
Gosh, I think the one that meant the most was the first big one that I won. Actually, it was the first one that I won. It was Book of the Year from Chanticleer Books and Media. It's an international award. It was for my debut novel. I would have never guessed that was going to happen. I entered just because I wanted to see how it would do. And the fact that I won absolutely shocked me. I've been fortunate that all 4 of my books about Guinevere, the 3 fiction and the 1 nonfiction, have won Book of the Year awards.
That's great.
When it kept happening, I was like, oh my God.
So it's interesting because that was your first book and that got your first book award. So how do you think that the award impacted your career, and also, like, in with that, how did it impact your readers' interest in the book?
I think it definitely helped. The fact that I was new, that I only had 1 book at the time, it was social proof for me that, yes, these books are worth reading. And especially as an indie author, I feel like that's very important. Anything that you can do that shows that other people see the value in your work can only help you. That book to this day is my bestseller, and it is the one with the highest number of reviews, whether you're looking at Amazon or Goodreads. And it's in, I think, probably the most libraries as well. I can't directly say, oh, because I won this award, my sales increased by X amount, but I can see it in other ways. And again, that's something that there's not a downside to. It really helps you get your name out there. And I know it's something that agents and editors look at to be able to say, okay, maybe this person has a little bit extra foot in the door because of something that they've won or something that somebody else has said about their work.
Nicole, what do you think makes your books stand out with readers and judges? Toot your horn here, please.
I mean, I would say they're obviously high quality books if other people have said so. I think it's the writing. I think it's the world building and the characters. There's a lot of research that goes into my books too. Even the contemporary, it's one that I don't sit down and just write. For people who can do that, I think that's a great skill. But for me, the more research I put into it, the more I feel like I can bring the world to life. And I think that definitely helps. In a way, I think the fact that I write about people that other people don't or that they haven't heard about helps, because it's not yet another book on Anne Boleyn or whoever. She just happens to be the one I pick on. That's a help and a hindrance in some ways, because traditional publishing tends to like names that they know, because obviously then it's more likely to sell. If you see, I'm just going to pick on Anne Boleyn again. If you see another Anne Boleyn book on the shelf, you'll go, oh, I know who that is. Maybe I'll read it. Whereas if you hear Victoria Woodhull, who's somebody I've written about, you have half a chance of going, oh, I don't know who that is. Let me see. Maybe I'll buy it to find out. But you also have a chance of somebody going, I don't know who that is, and just moving on to the next book. So,
and I would say, as a reader of your books, and one of your books especially, you are very authentic, and you can tell you've done the research, but you don't show off that you've done the research. Do you know what I mean? Like you're so submerged in that world that you feel like you're walking beside her. And I think when we take time out of our day and money to invest in a book, we want to escape completely, and we want to run back to that world. And you do an excellent job of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We were talking about this a little bit before we actually started recording. You have such a prolific career, and you have a full-time job in addition to this prolific writing career. How do you maintain a steady work and juggle the business side and the writing side and the whole other life that you have? Do you have any advice on time budgeting and strategies that you use?
Yeah, it takes a lot of discipline. That's the number one thing. It's interesting because I'm going through a transition right now. In my prior life, I was single. I didn't have any kids. So outside of my day job, I could completely devote, my time to writing. And I did for a while. I also burnt myself out that way. But that was the way that I did get 11 books, I think I'm on now, in such a short period of time. Now I'm married. I live somewhere else. I have nieces who want my time. In addition to that, I'm also ghostwriting, which I wasn't doing before. So for me now, I'm seeing it being, okay, let me try to find a healthier balance than I had before. I will say that one of my friends said to me one time, if it's important to you, whatever it is, you will make time for it. And I do find that to be the case. Previously, I had used some of my PTO days from my day job to have longer weekends and did at-home writing retreats. I still think that is something valid and something I will keep doing. I mostly write on the weekends because my day job is in marketing, so I'm writing during the day as well. I can do it in the evenings. I've done it. I've done National Novel Writing Month several times. That is very taxing to go and write 3,000 words a night on top of what I do. But if I have a goal or a deadline or something like that, even if it's not a contractual deadline, wanting to get a book done by a certain time, I will make myself do it. I've done things that I don't recommend, pulling all-nighters to get books done on time. I've actually done that twice.
Yeah.
But my biggest thing for people is please find a healthy way of doing it, because I've been through pretty much most of the unhealthy ways that you can. And I spent the last 2 years burned out because I pushed myself so hard.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, my husband is the one who helped me see how burned out I was and has helped me through it. So definitely, if you do get yourself in that situation, please find somebody that, you can talk to about it and give yourself the grace and give yourself time to get out of it. My main thing is it's healthier to take a little bit of time, whether it's on the weekends or in the evenings, whatever your schedule is, and write slower than it is to throw yourself completely into it like I did. It got me a lot, but it also cost a lot. I just want to make sure people learn from my mistakes.
Thank you for being vulnerable
Yeah.
and sharing that, because
Definitely.
I think that's something we all struggle with, not just with our writing, but just in life. And a lot of times we just bring it on ourselves, and it's hard. It's tough.
It is. It is, especially when you've got all of these ideas, and I find myself working on one and then I find out another thing I want to write about, and it's everything wants to come out, but there's only so much time, and I'm just having to learn patience. It's not something I was born with.
Yeah, and also as far as the awards, like how do you, before the cost, how do you even decide which ones you're going to submit? How does an author do that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
deciding what awards to enter is a very interesting process. There are a lot more resources now on which awards are legitimate and which ones aren't, because that is an important thing to think about. There are awards out there that are just there to take your money. For me, the biggest things I look at are how much does it cost? Because if it's more than $100 for an award, unless it's something like the Pulitzer or the National Book Award, then definitely don't enter it. I think there's only been one that I've entered that was $100, and I did it just because it was the only one I could find that had a series category, and I wanted to enter my Guinevere series, and that was a cost that I took, knowing that's more than is typically legitimate. I would say most awards will cost you somewhere between $50 and $100 to enter. I would say the smart thing to do is budget how much money you want to spend on awards and then prioritize them. I know that the Independent Book Publishers Association, IBPA, and Ally, which I cannot remember what they stand for right now, Association of Independent something. They're two independent book organizations. They have lists of the contests that they consider legitimate. Other than cost, I would look at what do you get if you're a winner. If it's something that only gives you a badge for your website and then, oh, we'll put you in our newsletter, that's not worth it to me to pay money. To me, you need to get either a cash prize, which is, to me, the ones that give you cash are the most legitimate because they're willing to put their money out as part of the program, or you need to get a ribbon or a trophy or a medal, and they need to have some sort of ceremony. Whether or not you can attend it doesn't matter. But if they're willing to put the money into an event, then they're way more likely to be legitimate. I would also go and look at their website, go and look at some of the previous winners, look at their sales and see if it looks like they're really selling. If they're not, then what did this award do for them? I've seen my friends, awards that I don't personally think are legitimate. I've seen them be like, hey, I won blah, blah, blah. And I think to myself, yeah, everybody who entered won that. If there are a ton of categories, that also tends to be a red flag. Now, there are some that I think are legitimate that have 50 categories. If you go back and look at my awards list on my website, you'll see basically the different ones that I've won. I personally believe that all of the ones that I've been in are legitimate, but I also think everybody who enters a contest thinks that they're legitimate. I think Writer Beware is still around. That's a website I would look at and do your research on the contest itself. Just do your research, trust your gut, and if it seems too good to be true, it is.
Wow, that's a lot of really great information. As someone who has been both traditionally published and self-published, can you tell us a little bit more about the advantages and challenges of each route? And also, since we're talking about awards, I know that's kind of a big deal to some people. There are awards that you can get only through trade publishing, and then some awards that you get through indie. Can you maybe talk about just that whole aspect of it?
Sure. I'm trying to think of where to start.
So, can you just tell us a little bit about being traditionally published and self-published, and what are the advantages and challenges of each of those
Sure.
routes?
Self-publishing, you have a lot more control. You have control over everything, from your back cover copy to what your cover looks like to how often you put your books on sale, how you market them, anything. You can go in and change the title of the book at any point if you want to. With traditional publishing, obviously, once it's out, I've been very fortunate that my publishers have consulted me on the back cover copy and the covers for all of my books. There really hasn't been much that's been out of my control, but I've also only been with small to medium sized publishers. I haven't been with the big five or four, whatever we're down to now. And I have heard stories. That's not necessarily the case with the bigger publishers. Again, I can't speak to that myself. So being I'm a Virgo, I love controlling things. That to me, that's a huge advantage of self-publishing, especially the sales. If something happens in the news that's connected to one of my books, I can, just in the amount of time that it takes me to make graphics, put one of my books on sale and do a whole campaign on, hey, this just happened, so you might want to read my book, or whatever it happens to be. Whereas for the traditionally published books, I have to go in and contact either my agent or my editor or both and say, hey, I'd like to do this, and it takes longer and the decision's not in my hands. One of the things that traditional publishing does for you that being self-published doesn't is gives you a little bit more of, the word cloud is what comes to mind, because you've got a publishing house behind you and you've already got that social proof that somebody else believes in you just because you have a contract. Because self-publishing is so crowded, publishing in general is crowded, but self-publishing especially, it can be hard for people to distinguish the people who have tried really hard to put out books that are on par with traditionally published books versus the ones that just have either just slapped things together and don't care and are just trying to make money, or people who aren't as experienced in self-publishing. I will say that unless you are the book that a traditional publisher thinks is going to be the next big hit, they are not going to put a lot of marketing behind you. They will do some stuff, but you're pretty much going to have to do your marketing yourself either way. So if that's something you're looking for in a traditional publishing deal, the likelihood of you getting exactly what you see out there of, oh, there's an ad in the New York Times book review or something like that, those are their big books. And the likelihood of you early on in your career getting something like that is slim. So I want to say that if you want to go the traditional publishing route, make sure you're doing it for a reason other than that. Whether there are a lot of perfectly legitimate choices for going traditionally published, but just make sure you go in with your eyes open. Both of them are difficult. There is no easy route in publishing, in writing. You also, as a self-published author, have more control in the editing and that whole aspect of, and the business aspect of writing, because you're the one who employs the editor. You can listen to what you want to listen to. I mean, you can always fight back on edits that you don't feel like are legitimate to the story or that change the story, regardless of how you're published. But you have every little bit of control when you're self-published. When I did my own audiobooks, I was able to do every step. I picked who the voice was, the narrator. I went through and did, okay, I don't like how this word is pronounced. I would pronounce it this way, or there's too long of a pause here. That's stuff that you definitely don't have control over when it's a traditional deal. A lot of my friends who have traditionally sold audiobook rights don't even get to hear the book until it's already out. There's a give and take in both versions.
That's fascinating. I like that.
It is fascinating. And I have basically seen the same thing, all of that, as far as what my clients have gone through too. So being that, there is just this giant pool of books out there, I have heard some people say the reason that they go traditional is because they want to be able to be, a New York Times bestselling author, which you can't do, as
Right.
an indie. But then there are things you can do as an indie. So I think awards are the same
Yes.
way, right? So can you tell us a bit about the awards that you can get as a traditional author and also as a self-published author, and which ones are the most desirable, or how do you stand out
I
that way?
think Definitely the biggest awards are ones you can only get if you're traditionally published, partly because most of the time it's the publishing house that has to apply for the award. So if you're looking for the National Book Award, any of those big prizes that you see the top lists in Publishers Weekly or the New York Times Book Review, those are the traditional only. The interesting thing is the Pulitzer, you can actually enter yourself. I don't remember if they have a rule as to whether you have to be traditionally published or not. I don't think so. I actually entered it myself with my biography, America's Forgotten Suffragists, which is traditionally published, just because I thought, you know what? I know I have a snowball's chance, but you can't win if you don't play. And that's how I feel about most contests, at least the ones I consider legitimate. Even if I don't think there's a huge chance, which most of the time I don't, I'm going to do it anyway because all you're out is the money that you pay. And if it's something you can afford and something that you budget for, there's not a downside in entering a contest. The indie contests, for the most part, aren't really as recognized as the ones that you can get through traditional publishing. I think most people would look at them and go, I've never heard of that. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to discount it. It's just it doesn't have the name recognition of the Penn Faulkner or some of the bigger contests. Like I said before, I think the big advantage of entering contests as an indie author is, again, getting that social proof and showing that other people believe in your work. It feels great on the ego. That doesn't matter what type of contest it is. And it is something that you can add to your biography that can never be taken away from you. Honestly, it's good for the confidence too, because when you're an indie author, you might be querying on the side if you want to go the hybrid route. And there's a lot of rejection that's involved in that. When anything that you can do that helps keep your confidence up is also very helpful. So again, it's a matter of what do you want? Why are you doing it as to which route you're going to go?
That's really good advice.
It is good. And I like that you said you're talking about budgeting for it. Like being intentional so you don't, if you don't win the award, you don't feel like I should have spent that money or I could,
exactly.
You have that goal in mind. So with that being said, do you, when you're writing, do you have an award in mind, or
sometimes
do you ever, does that influence your writing?
It can. Like, I wrote America's Forgotten Suffragists with the intention of winning the Pulitzer.
Look at you.
I love it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Hey,
I realize what that says about my ego.
No, those are goals.
Yeah.
That's goals.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Well, and it helped me because that was my first biography. It helped me keep in mind the absolute rigor that book is going to be up against. And I read other Pulitzer Prize winning biographies because I wanted to see what is it that the judges are reacting to, because there aren't any rules out there. You can't find out what the criteria is for winning a Pulitzer. They keep that completely quiet. So the best thing you can do is read, and actually this applies to any award that you want, is to read other books who have won those awards, because then that shows you the caliber of writing that they're looking for. It doesn't mean your book's going to be exactly the same. It could be completely different, but it gives you like a basis to start with.
That's great advice.
I think that is incredible that you would think about holding yourself to a certain standard and writing to that standard. And I think it's brilliant, because I'm just going to say this, and maybe some of my clients will be mad at me, but honestly, like the first book that I take on is almost always their best book. And then the second book they give me, it's not as good. They haven't polished it as much. They haven't worked as hard on it because they know that they have me.
Mm-hmm.
And you're on a pedestal now for me, because you're holding yourself to a higher standard. And I think that's amazing.
Well, and I will admit there's a downside to that as well, because I'm naturally a perfectionist and I naturally strive to always do better. But that can also drive you nuts, because you can look at what you've done and you can see other people's success and go, but why didn't this do what that person's did? I've experienced that myself. You can also never see yourself as good enough or your work as good enough because you're constantly striving. Those are lessons that I've had to learn.
Yeah.
So again, that's a balance. And yes, you always want to keep getting better, but as the saying goes, don't let perfection stand in the way of your success. A book can be good enough for what you're doing, whatever that may be, but not be perfect. If you always keep striving for perfect, you're going to stop yourself and never keep going. So again, writing has a lot of mental gymnastics with it, where you have to hold two things in your head at the same time. And putting the pressure on yourself to constantly be better can do more harm than good, depending on how you do it. And a lot of these things are things you learn over time too. And you learn through trial and error. And sometimes it's don't do what I did.
Right.
I do love, though, that you're using an award to inspire yourself to achieve and to go farther. And I think that's a great way to set goals for yourself. What advice would you give for authors that haven't won an award but aspire to?
The very first thing is to produce the highest quality work you can. Produce the best book that you can, because that is the basis of everything. Without a high quality book that has been well edited and written intentionally, you're going to lose before you start. But once you have something like that, look around for the awards that you want to enter, that you feel are legitimate, and don't be afraid to enter them. The worst thing that can happen is somebody says no, that you don't win. Yeah. A lot of awards will also offer feedback, which is one of the things I'm finding, especially in adaptation contests where you enter a book and it's okay, the person who wins has a chance of getting this adapted to TV or film. You can ask for feedback. It costs you a little extra money. So again, you have to make sure that's something you can do. But the feedback that you get is invaluable, because these are, whatever the award is, these are industry people who are looking at your book and saying, this is how we feel about it. If you get the same criticism a couple of different times, it's probably something that you should look at, even if it's a contest that's done locally through a writing group and it doesn't have industry people in it. Those are other writers who are seeing something, whether it's good or bad. One person, the feedback could just be personal opinion, but when you get it more than once, then it's something good or bad that you definitely want to look at and either change or keep doing in the future. That's something that I found as well.
Speaking of other people, can you tell us how your critique partners play a role? Are you going for awards or maybe holding off or things like that, the importance of them for you personally?
I think having people that look at your work is very important, because they're a completely different set of eyes, a completely different set of life experiences that are coming at your book, just like your readers will. I don't have a formal critique group, but previously my mom was always the first person to read my stuff. And I'm very lucky that she, in all aspects of life, she calls everything like she sees it. She is not one that's going to say, oh, because you're my daughter, this is the best possible book. If yours is, or if your significant other is, then they may be people that you don't want to include in your group. But if they're willing to give you honest feedback, if you're picking a group of beta readers or you're picking a critique group, pick a diverse group, both in age, life experience, background, because you don't know who's going to pick up your book and want to read it. So you want to know how different people are going to react to it. I had a person who read Madame Presidentes somewhere in its development, and she flat out said, okay, I got to this point. I have no reason to keep reading this book. And that hurt like you would not believe. I actually got mad at her for a while, but it was feedback that I needed to hear. And that's a book that has since then gone on to be optioned for film. It wasn't made, but 99% of books that are optioned aren't made. I thank her for that feedback. You need to make sure that people are going to give you honest feedback, that they are coming at it from a variety of viewpoints. You also want to make sure that they are generally readers in your genre. You might want to have one that's not, just to get that outside opinion. But as we all know, there are certain tropes, no matter what your genre is, and rules that people expect to see followed. You want to know what people are expecting and if you've hit the mark or not, because a lot of times you're too close to it. It's something you can't see.
Good point.
Last question we have about On the Horizon.
Yes.
Next, I'm working on a more lighthearted historical fiction novel that is based on a contest that happened around early 1900s just outside of Atlanta. I'm not going to say anything more about it so that I don't give too much away, but it's a newspaper article that made national and international news. It went as far as Australia, England, a whole bunch of different places across the world from this little bitty town in Georgia. But the weird thing is I can't find that it is historically backed up by that community. So I don't know if it ever actually happened, but God, thank you for the fiction part of historical fiction. So it doesn't matter. It's an awesome story. And I think it'll stand out because it is more lighthearted in such a heavy genre. Looking forward to that. I'm also researching a dark academia book that is also historical fiction. It has to do with how women got rights in England. And I'm not going to say anything more than that on that one either. And I'm ghostwriting a book right now. All I can say about that because of an NDA is that it is historical fiction. I will say it takes place around the year 1900. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. You probably won't ever see my name on that one, but when it comes out, I hope you decide you like it.
That's so fun.
I love hearing your story and your journey and all of the wonderful things you're doing. You're inspiring me to get busy writing and set a goal to win something with my writing. So thank you so
I'm
much.
still determined to get that Pulitzer.
I love
Just because
that.
it didn't happen
And
the first
we
time
are
doesn't
going
mean it's not
to
going
cheer
to.
you on all the way.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Oh, it was fun.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Wayward Writers.
Let's connect. Find us at waywardwriters.com, X, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook.
See you next time. Conquer your path.